I expected a feminist rant, but then I watched Yes, All Men. When I first saw the title of this video, Yes, All Men, I had a very negative reaction. My immediate thought was, here we go again, another video blaming all men for the actions of a few bad men. Another video that treats masculinity itself as a problem. Another lecture about how men are the cause of everything wrong in society. And to be fair, I've seen some of the Pakistani Experience content before. The host is passionate, outspoken, and often very aggressive in how he presents his arguments. So before I even pressed play, I already had my guard up. But I want to be fair. One of the goals of this channel is to follow the evidence wherever it leads, even when it challenges my instincts. So instead of reacting to the title, I decided to focus on the arguments. The video centers on the horrific murder of a woman by her husband, a man named Asghar Ali. According to the story discussed in the video, he justified the killing in an incredibly disturbing way, essentially saying that he wanted sex, she refused, and that was the source of the conflict. Now let's be clear, if that account is accurate, then what happened is evil. A husband does not own his wife. A wife is not property. A woman does not lose her humanity because she gets married. And if a husband assaults or kills his wife because she refuses sex, there's no justification for that. None. In fact, one thing I discovered while thinking through this topic is that my views might not be what some people expect. I do believe men and women are different. I do believe modesty is important. I do believe traditional family structures often contain wisdom. But I do not believe any of those things give man an ownership over a woman. A woman can say no. A husband has no right to force himself on his wife. And violence is completely unacceptable. So on those points, I actually found myself agreeing with much of the video's criticism. The part that made me think the most was not the murder itself. Everyone agrees murder is wrong. The more interesting question is whether there are broader cultural attitudes that contribute to these outcomes. For example, suppose a woman is assaulted, and instead of focusing on the criminal, people ask, what was she wearing? Why was she outside? Why was she talking to a man? Why was she out at night? Maybe she wanted it. Maybe she deserved it. If a society responds that way, I think that is morally horrifying. Victim blaming is wrong. The responsibility belongs to the person who committed the crime, not to the victim. So when the host talks about victim blaming, I think he's criticizing something real. Likewise, I agree that some men develop a sense of entitlement toward women. Some men genuinely believe that because they spent money on a woman, married a woman, or desire a woman, they have some kind of claim over her body. I reject that completely. Desire does not create ownership. Marriage does not create ownership. Being a man does not create ownership. Where I begin to disagree with the video is when criticism of these attitudes start to blur into criticism of men as a class. This is where the title, Yes, All Men, immediately triggered my skepticism. Because my first reaction was not, yes, let's discuss a social problem. My reaction was, are we really going to blame all men? And after reflecting on it, I think that distinction matters. There is a huge difference between saying some men have destructive attitudes and saying men are the problem. There's a huge difference between criticizing entitlement and condemning half the human race. Now, maybe the host would argue that he isn't literally saying all men are rapists or abusers. Perhaps his point is that cultural attitudes are widespread and therefore criticism must be broad. That's a fair discussion to have, but I still think precision matters. Because when people hear slogans like, yes, all men, many ordinary men who have never abused anyone feel accused before the conversation even begins. And that's not always productive. Another interesting realization I had while thinking through this video concerns patriarchy. For years, I've often described myself as somewhat traditional. I believe men and women are different. I think there is beauty in masculinity and femininity. I like the idea of complementarity between the sexes. So when feminists criticize patriarchy, I've often felt they are attacking the idea that men and women are different. But during my reflection, I realized something important. Maybe there are actually two separate questions. Question number one, are men and women different? Question number 2, should one sex have authority over the other? Those are not the same question. You can believe men and women are different while still believing that husbands and wives should be equal partners. And that's where I found myself landing. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I do not actually want a marriage based on hierarchy. I don't want a husband ruling over a wife. I don't want a wife ruling over a husband. I want a partnership, a team, two people working together. Now, of course, practical decisions still have to be made. Every family has disagreements. Every relationship involves compromise. But that's very different from saying that one person possesses authority over the other. In fact, I realized something surprising. I may be less patriarchal than I once thought. I still believe men and women are different. I still have reservations about some forms of modern feminism. But when it comes to dignity, consent, and moral worth, I believe husbands and wives should stand as equals. And that brings me back to the video. Did the Pakistani experience convince me that Pakistan has a rape culture? Possibly. I don't have enough first-hand knowledge to confidently judge an entire society. What I can say is that if the examples presented in the video are representative, if victim blaming, domestic abuse, and entitlement are routinely normalized, then those are serious problems that deserve criticism. At the same time, I remain cautious about broad generalizations. I don't like reducing complex societies to slogans. I don't like judging millions of people based on the actions of the worst individuals. And I don't think traditional views about modesty or gender differences automatically lead to violence. For me, the real issue is not traditionalism. The real issue is entitlement. A man can believe in modesty and still respect women. A man can believe men and women are different and still respect women. A man can hold conservative views and still condemn rape, abuse, and coercion without hesitation. The problem begins when difference becomes domination, when affection becomes ownership, when desire becomes entitlement, and when women stop being viewed as people and start being viewed as objects. That, I think, is where the strongest part of the video lies. In the end, my reaction was not what I expected. I expected to reject the entire argument. Instead, I found myself agreeing with much of the substance while questioning some of the framing. And perhaps that's the most valuable outcome of all. Not changing sides, not joining a movement, but becoming a little more precise in what I believe.